Penguin Random House Audio presents There Are No Grown-Ups, a midlife coming-of-age story. This is the author, Pamela Druckerman. Introduction. Bonjour, madame. If you want to know how old you look, just walk into a French cafe. It's like a public referendum on your face. When I moved to Paris in my early 30s, waiters called me mademoiselle. It was bonjour, mademoiselle, when I walked into a cafe, and voilà, mademoiselle, as I set down a coffee in front of me. I sat in many different cafes in those early years. I didn't have an office, so I spent my days writing in them. And everywhere, I was mademoiselle. The word technically means unmarried woman, but it's come to signify young lady. Around the time I turned 40, however, there's a collective code switch. Waiters start calling me madame, though with exaggerated formality or a jokey wink. It's as if madame is a game we're playing. They still sprinkle in the occasional mademoiselle. Soon, even these jocular mademoiselles cease, and my madames are no longer tentative or ironic. It's as if the waiters of Paris, they're mostly men, have decided en masse that I've exited the liminal zone between young and middle-aged. On one hand, I'm intrigued by this transition. Do the waiters gather after work for Sancerre and a slideshow to decide which female customers to downgrade? Irritatingly, men are monsieur forever. I'm aware of the conventions of aging, of course. I've watched as small crinkles and creases appeared on the faces of my peers. Already in my 40s, I can see the outline of what some people I know will look like at 70. I just didn't expect madame to happen to me, or at least not without my consent. Though I'd never been beautiful, in my 20s I'd discovered my superpower. I looked young. I still had the skin of a teenager. People honestly couldn't tell whether I was 16 or 26. I was once standing alone on a New York subway platform when an older man stopped and said, sweetly, "You've still got your baby face." I knew what he meant, and I was determined to preserve this small advantage. Long before any of my peers fretted about wrinkles, I used sunblock and eye cream each morning and rubbed on more potions before bed. I didn't waste a smile on something that wasn't truly funny. All this effort paid off. Into my 30s, strangers still routinely assumed I was a college student, and bartenders asked to see my identification. My compliment age, the age people say you look, to which you must add 6 or 7 years, hovered safely around 26. In my 40s, I expect to finally reap the average-looking girl's revenge. I've entered the stage of life where you don't need to be beautiful. Simply by being well-preserved and not obese, I would now pass for pretty. For a while, this strategy seems to work. Fields of micro-wrinkles appear on the faces of women who'd always been far better looking than me. If I haven't seen someone in a few years, I brace myself before meeting her, lest I accidentally gawk at how much she's changed. The French call this tendency to look the same for a long stretch, then to suddenly look much older, a coup de vieux, an age blow. I regard the graying roots and creased foreheads of many of my peers with sad detachment. I am proof of the adage that everyone eventually gets the face she deserves. And what I deserve is, obviously, a permanently youthful glow. But in the course of what seems like a few months, something changes in me, too. Strangers no longer gush about how young I look, or seem shocked when I reveal that I have 3 children. People I haven't seen in a while clock my face for a few extra beats. When I arrive to meet a younger friend at a cafe, he stares right past me at first. He doesn't realize that the middle-aged lady standing in front of him is me. Not everyone my age is distressed by these changes, but many seem to be suffering from a kind of midlife shock. One friend says that when she walks into a party, There's no longer a Cinderella moment when everyone turns to look at her. I've noticed that men only appraise me on the streets of Paris now if I'm in full hair and makeup. And even then, I detect a disturbing new message in their gazes. I would sleep with her, but only if doing so required no effort whatsoever. Soon the madames are coming at me like a hailstorm. It's bonjour madame when I walk into a cafe, merci madame when I pay my bill, and au revoir madame as I leave. Sometimes several waiters shout this at once. The worst part is that they're not trying to insult me. Here in France, where I've lived for a dozen years as an expatriate, madame is a routine form of politeness. I call other women madame all the time and teach my kids to say it to the elderly Portuguese lady who looks after our building. In other words, I'm now considered to be so safely into madame territory, people assume the title can't possibly wound me. I realize that something has permanently shifted when I walk past a woman who's begging for money on a sidewalk near my house. Bonjour, mademoiselle, she calls out to the young woman in a miniskirt a few steps ahead of me. Bonjour, madame, she says when I pass in front of her a second later. This has all happened too quickly for me to digest. I still have most of the clothes that I wore as a mademoiselle. There are mademoiselle-era cans of food in my pantry. Even the math seems fuzzy. How is it that, in the course of a few years, everyone else has become a decade younger than me? What are the 40s? It's been my custom not to grasp a decade's main point until it's over and I've squandered it. I spent my 20s scrambling in vain to find a husband when I should have been building my career as a journalist and visiting dangerous places before I had kids. As a result, in my early 30s, I was promptly fired from my job at a newspaper. That freed me up to spend the rest of my 30s ruminating on grievances and lost time. This time, I'm determined to figure out the decade while I'm still in it. But while each new birthday brings some vertigo, you're always the oldest you've ever been. The modern 40s are especially disorienting. They're a decade without a narrative. They're not just a new number. They feel like a new atmospheric zone. When I tell a 42-year-old entrepreneur that I'm researching the 40s, his eyes widen. He's successful and articulate, but his age leaves him speechless. Please, he says, tell me what they are. Obviously, the 40s depend on the beholder and on your family, your health, your finances, and your country. I'm experiencing them as a privileged white American woman, not exactly a beleaguered group. I'm told that when a woman turns 40 in Rwanda, she's henceforth addressed as grandma. With their signature blend of precision and pessimism, the French have carved up midlife into the crisis of the 40s, the crisis of the 50s, and the noonday demon, described by one writer as when a man in his 50s falls in love with the babysitter. And yet they have an optimistic story about how to age, in which a person strives to become free. The French are flawed, but I've learned from some of their better ideas. Wherever you are, 40 looks old from below. I hear Americans in their 20s describe the 40s as a mythic far-off decade of too late, when they'll regret things that they haven't done. When I tell one of my sons that I'm writing a book about the 40s, he says that he'd like to write a short one about being 9. It'll say, I'm 9 years old, I'm so lucky, I'm still young. And yet, for many senior citizens I meet, the 40s are the decade that they would most like to time travel back to. How could I possibly have thought of myself as old at 40? Asked Stanley Brandis, an anthropologist who wrote a book about turning 40 in 1985. I sort of look back and think, God, how lucky I was. I see it as the beginning of life, not the beginning of the end. 40 isn't even technically middle-aged anymore. Someone who's now 40 has a 50% chance of living to age 95, says economist Andrew Scott, co-author of The 100-Year Life. But the number 40 still has gravitas and symbolic resonance. Jesus fasted for 40 days. Muhammad was 40 when the Archangel Gabriel appeared to him.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?